Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CPSA webinar called Eat Their Lunch, Winning Customers Away from Your Competition, brought to you by Budget and Avis and hosted by Chris Champagne, a bilingual sales transformation specialist and sales coach with experience leading and motivating high-impact sales teams. Please note that you've all been placed on mute for the duration of this webinar and that you may ask questions at the end of the session using your Ask Question function in your GoToWebinar dashboard. We'll try our best to get to all of your questions. Just a bit about our sponsor, Avis and Budget. CPSA members can enjoy a special negotiated rate for business when renting with either Avis or Budget. Plus, great leisure rates are also available when it's time for that well-deserved vacation. Enroll today with a complimentary membership in an Avis Preferred or Budget Fast Break to save time by skipping the counter, paperwork, and go straight to your car, as well as gain access to exclusive offers. In addition, Aeroplan members can earn Aeroplan reward miles at participating Avis and Budget locations worldwide. Air Miles collectors can get Air Miles reward miles at participating Budget locations in Canada and the US. Be sure to download the Avis app for an even simpler experience. With the app, you can make updates to your reservation, choose your car at pickup, find gas stations nearby, and so much more. See avis.ca/CPSA or budget.ca/CPSA for more details. Hosting today's webinar is Chris Champagne. Chris is a bilingual transformation sales specialist and sales coach with experience leading and motivating high-impact sales teams. He has a proven history of consistently delivering sales performance improvements, leveraging his facilitation and coaching roles. His one-on-one coaching with executives, sales managers, and frontline sales professionals has a direct impact on bottom-line results. Chris also collaborates with small and mid-sized companies to assess their sales teams, develop tailored coaching plans, and implement sales transformation programs. This webinar is specifically for salespeople who sell in competitive industries, where products or services are mostly equal and where the value they create is the primary differentiator. As an extra bonus, a draw will take place at the end of the webinar for 3 copies of Eat Their Lunch by best-selling author Anthony Iannarino. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Chris to start.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rupine. Really excited to be with you all today from coast to coast. Welcome for those from the East and the West, as well as locally here in Toronto. We're at the worldwide headquarters of the Canadian Professional Sales Association here in Toronto. And I'm grateful to Martin Boucher and Nick Crow from the CPSA in sponsorship of this program, where the initial conversation started with Martin a few months ago to get us to this point. So I'm grateful for the CPSA and their partnership. And thank you for investing time from your busy day to spend the next 55 minutes or so with us as I look to help you build initiatives, ideas around competitive displacement, and really focusing on Anthony Iannarino's Eat Their Lunch as a way to kind of get the conversation started. We're going to walk through the agenda quickly. Brief introduction in terms of background. Already had a really great introduction. Thanks, Rupine. And now we're going to get into the agenda. I'm going to provide some ideas around how to get the most out of today's agenda just following this slide. The 2 topics that we're going to cover as part of Eat Their Lunch are arguably the most important topics in the book. And we're going to start with You Are the Value Proposition and talk about how to enter from the left, how to enter from the right, entering from the right from a level 4 value position versus level 1 and talking about product. Also, we're going to have an action item for you. Part of today's agenda in preparing the content for you was 2 questions that I'm going to ask during the webinar for you to really think about and practically apply some of these theory that I'm going to be providing to make them more tactical for you in application. So there's going to be a couple of questions after You Are the Value Proposition, as well as capturing mindshare. And then we'll wrap up. We might have time for a few questions towards the end, and of course, give away our 3 copies of Eat Their Lunch. So let's get started. Real quick, thank you for the intro. Just really to share with you, and I'm grateful for those that have joined today that I've had the pleasure to work with But when I wake up every morning, my passion is to help salespeople, help sales leaders realize their true potential that enables them to enjoy the success and consistently achieve outstanding results in their sales performance. And I'm grateful for my partnership with the Canadian Professional Sales Association, and today talking specifically about Eat Their Lunch and through my exclusive partnership that I have with Anthony Iarino in representing his content in Canada. How are you going to maximize the next 55 minutes or so? I'd suggest remove your distractions. Part of getting the most in terms of investing your time is focus. And I'd suggest in terms of the email that might be open or the phone that's close at hand, you want to get the most of our time together, try to eliminate those distractions if you can. And really focus. And I'm going to give you everyone a goal in terms of something to think about as we go through the webinar today. Think of a client you're trying to pursue, a client that is maybe today not responsive to you through your phone calls and through your emails, and write that name down now. Who is that client you're pursuing or want to pursue? And I'm going to provide to you some ideas through our content today on how to get that started, or perhaps to break through with a client today that you haven't had success before. Stay engaged, take some notes, and ultimately get the most out of your investment of time today, your precious, most important resource. So why Eat Their Lunch? This book for me has been a game changer. And in terms of sharing the content with you today, what got me excited about Eat Their Lunch was the uniqueness of the content that Anthony has created, seen here in this picture with me at the Outbound conference that we were at earlier this year, that the framework works. And through application of the techniques that we're going to talk about today, there's no faster path to winning net new business than actually having a game plan on how to do it. And Eat Their Lunch provides this framework, and we're going to dive into some of the content now. Maybe just to set the stage for how difficult it is to win in business today and the reality of how business is changing, that if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. Hence, the investment that you're making today in your sales profession, in yourself, that ultimately are going to help you to be more successful. And the salespeople today that are standing still, they're not investing in developing their skill, listening to podcasts, reading books, participating in feedback that ultimately others are passing you. And hence the passion that I have for elevating the sales abilities through content and through partnerships that can make you more relevant to your clients and ultimately to propel your success in sales. High-level overview of Eat Their Lunch and the methodology. And we're going to touch on the first two in terms of identifying strategic outcomes and really how do you create level 4 value from the start in initiating a client conversation. How do you leverage research and trends in terms of really identifying where there could be opportunities for your clients? And then subsequently developing a prospecting sequence. One of the last slides that I'll share with you is actually a script that I use when prospecting for new business. So watch out for that one towards the end of the webinar. And then other additional topics that are part of Eat Their Lunch is controlling the process, really the time the clients spend together with you, having a different type of discovery session in how you ask questions, but more specifically, how you bring ideas to client meetings that differentiate you, and how do you work with different stakeholders who have different priorities, and how do you build consensus? A quick stat, and you're probably aware of this one today, opportunities greater than $50,000 today require almost 12 people that will touch that deal, which has gone up dramatically over the last 2 years in terms of the amount of people that are involved in opportunities. I'm sure many of us on the line today have had opportunities that go dark, clients that are unresponsive. So some ideas certainly around how to get engagement through the sales process. And then how do you build preference, which really at the end of the day in sales, how you create a preference with your clients and how you also create a case for change is really underpins the methodology of Eat Their Lunch that ultimately can set you up to grow your business. At the heart of change, from a client point of view, is really what you do to help differentiate with preparation, with facts and figures, to differentiate yourself versus the competition. And I think the book really does a great job of pushing for a strong call back to the fundamentals in how you sell, in how you create value, in how you create market share, a mind share, proactively prospecting, having that time actually blocked in your calendar to accomplish that. It's also a reminder that sales is a competition. It's often a zero-sum game. There's winners and there's losers. And fundamentally, the more prepared you are to win, the greater the likelihood are that you're going to be successful. And focusing more on how you sell, not so much of the competition, and how can you be better today than you were yesterday. And who you are matters the most, and how you create an unfair advantage in how you communicate and bring value together with your clients. So we're going to get into a little bit more tactical now in terms of the actual presentation of value and how to enter a client conversation from the right at the strategic partner level. I'm going to bring you through each of the product experience and results, which today in a highly commoditized marketplace, customers focused on price as a way to negotiate and whittle away your margin in the opportunities that you're working, and how you're able to differentiate yourself with this different approach, certainly through net new client meetings, but also with existing clients as well. And the opportunity to approach a client in a different way right off the bat is an opportunity to be able to differentiate yourself from your competition, and how you create opportunities with clients that today isn't even on their radar screen, but you did the work before entering the client conversation, that you brought ideas, insights, trends. That's not about product or service, it's about what's happening in the market, and perhaps creating a vision right from the start in a client engagement that separates you from everyone else that's knocking on your client's door, that starts the conversation around displacing an incumbent, which arguably is one of the most hardest things to do. And the content that I'm going to share with you today, this is not easy. There's no fast path to success in sales. The hard work that you put in around meeting preparation and planning, and the ideas and insight, the research that you bring to the table, this takes time. So I'm not going to give you any expectations that this is easy. This is hard and it takes time. However, the payoff is if you do the work and you get comfortable with a level 4 value proposition out of the gate, you're going to set yourself up for greater long-term success. So let's start with level 1, a good product or a good service. And in a very highly commoditized marketplace, arguably today, the salespeople that spend time talking about their product and differentiation, or client references, or perhaps being able to talk a little deeper about the benefits of the product or service, this is important. This is a way to get engagement with the client. However, competition also is minimizing how effective a level 1 relationship can be, in that product to product, maybe you're a manufacturer or a distributor or a reseller of different products, that ultimately just having a product conversation will essentially lead to a price conversation. And the reality is, spending time at a level 1 relationship a lot of times is just focused on price. And ultimately, the one with the lowest price wins. And I'm sure, from your experience, everyone that's on the line today, the amount of time you take negotiating price and working to ultimately meet a competitor's price potentially is difficult, and it's time consuming. How are you able to essentially differentiate yourself through your client conversations? Takes a lot of preparation in advance, actually, which ultimately can give your client different ideas, which then removes you. Not completely. Price will always be part of the equation. However, you can have different, more value types conversations. And just to finish off on level one, ultimately to compel a client to change, part of the fabric that is of Eat Their Lunch is actually having a different conversation. By maintaining a level one product type conversation, this alone is not going to compel a client to change from their current supplier to working with you. And I guess the reality of dealing in a product type conversation with a client is so transactional that if you act like a transaction, the client will essentially treat you like you're a transaction in terms of how they feel about you and how you interact with them in terms of their business. Transactional business is important. The Amazonification that's happening in business is the reality that the click essentially is disintermediating the salesperson. Therefore, even more of a need to be able to differentiate yourself outside of a product conversation that over time you'll spend less time having that transactional conversation because ultimately you're delivering more value to your clients. Moving to level two. Again, from a value point of view, outstanding service. Certainly implementation could be part of your product or solution that you're delivering to a client today. Troubleshooting issues potentially, being responsive, delivering outstanding support. Being able to differentiate, however, in a B2B world is essentially reacting to a product or a service issue. Being responsive, absolutely important. Table stakes, I think today in terms of what clients are expecting from a salesperson today, that bringing more to the table over and above being very responsive and providing outstanding service is ultimately a way for you to differentiate for sure. But ultimately the outcomes for the client are very much service-based. However, an opportunity to be able to actually help them materially in their business by bringing more value in the ideas or insights that you can bring to the table. So certainly level two is important. Level two is better than level one in terms of the support that's being brought to the equation. But in a B2B world where competition is so intense and, kind of the analogy of the red ocean is the ocean that we all live in a B2B world because it's so competitive. There's blood that's in the water. However, those that have the biggest fins and the sharpest teeth and perhaps are the great white shark in the red ocean stand a better chance to survive. However, level one and level two still very much in a commodity type conversation with the client. Moving to level three, business results. Solving tangible business problems, continuing to deliver outstanding support, having a good product or service. Ultimately, having a good product or service, the product, as we know in sales, is not going to sell itself. Ultimately, we're the ones that are going to be able to bring what's different about our product or service, but tying it to the business and actually having a business conversation with the client of what's happening within their business and not necessarily asking the question about what's keeping them up at night. I had a client share with me yesterday as we were talking about putting together an Eat Their Lunch workshop, and it was being able to know actually what is keeping our client up at night and being able to share with them a perspective in a first meeting, a different type of conversation in terms of trying to respond to a client's challenges, taking a more proactive way, as we'll get into in level four, to be able to ultimately help them in their business with an idea or insight that they wouldn't have thought of previously. Also, as part of kind of delivering outcomes at this level three level, which is important, is perhaps an ROI or a TCO that's part of the value that you're demonstrating to your clients. That's important. I know when I worked at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise for a number of years, bringing a ROI or a TCO model on the infrastructure that we were providing to them as a means to compel them to change was important. However, on reflection, my competitors were essentially doing the same thing. And the ROI or the TCO that was being looked at in procurement essentially became a battle of spreadsheets, and whose spreadsheet looked better than the other. And oftentimes losing on price potentially as the reason, or maybe my initial reason why I thought we lost. Ultimately, I didn't bring enough value to the equation for the client to make change. So outcomes alone, or solving tangible business problems alone, together with having an outstanding service as well as having a good product or support, ultimately isn't delivering the full potential for what you and your organization potentially can bring to your clients. Changing the mindset to having a level 4 conversation with clients that absolutely is tied to strategic outcomes in terms of how does it help them in their business? What is it that you're doing in terms of the product value potentially, the service that you're bringing? How does it help customers make money? How does your product or services enable them to gain market share? How does your product or service enable them to reduce cost? These are all important. Additive to that, and was actually shared with me in a CPSA course last week as we were having a discussion about the future and a vision that you can create, having that vision of the future, and perhaps providing an idea or perhaps vision based on pure facts that you can provide a better solution for them than they haven't even been thinking of in their business previously. So your ability to provide some ideas in terms of trends, and we're going to get into how to capture mindshare as the next step in terms of our content today, but having the courage actually to do the research, to think about, kind of like as a client's second brain, if you will, that you're thinking about what opportunities exist for your clients outside of your product or service. Certainly it's related to your industry. However, what are the trends? What are the insights? What are the ideas that you can have a more business-focused discussion with your clients? Let me give you an example of potentially how this could work for you. Imagine a meeting that you're having with your dream client next week. And part of maybe it's a first meeting you're having with the client. The typical way, and often showing up and wanting to get to the product or the service conversation is important. However, the mindset of putting yourself in your customer's shoes first, to be able to first kind of envision the pain perhaps they're having in their business today. Maybe it's a very commoditized market that they play in. The value that you can bring by providing an agenda in advance, 24 hours in advance of your meeting. Here's some suggested ideas for our meeting that are open for discussion, that create right away a different impression for the client of who they're doing business with. And the fact that you can show up, have a game plan, thought of it in advance, thought of the ideas or insights that you're going to share with them. Sure, you're going to get to have the product conversation at some point. However, how you get there and the thoughtfulness that you put in your preparation and having that mindset of really putting yourself in the customer's shoes, acting like their second brain, is a different approach. And it elevates a conversation with a client and elevates you in terms of how you prepare and the confidence. That's the other aspect of having a level 4 approach, is all the work that you do before you show up ultimately elevates your confidence in how you communicate in a client meeting, as well as your resourcefulness. Having a game plan in advance and doing the good work, and as a client had shared with me previously, all the work that is done in private ultimately can be praised in public, that the work that's done in advance in the research that you do ultimately can give you an advantage and a better impression with the client that separates you. Such a difficult place to be in a B2B world today, and how much there is the same. But having a more level 4 conversation right from the start ideally sets you up for success in how you'll be able to have a more productive meeting. So just before we move to the next slide, maybe pause for just a moment. Think of that meeting that you have next week. Think about perhaps blocking 30 minutes in your calendar 24 hours in advance to think about their business. And I'm going to provide you with some ideas on how that meeting could be different for you that perhaps gets your client really excited and they're asking for the next meeting with you as opposed to you asking for that next step. And it kind of happens more logically as you build more value as a result. So just to quickly summarize on the levels of value and keeping in mind, each of these are important. Having differentiation in your product is important. Perhaps it's the way that you got in the door. However, how you elevate yourself in moving through the different levels of value through experience and support, and how you deliver business value through outcomes is important. However, to swim in the red ocean and to win in the red ocean, entering from the right, having a different, more strategic conversation focused on the client's business and the future that you envision for them, ultimately is a way for you to differentiate yourself in a very highly commoditized marketplace. So let's continue on as we think about a question. This is the action part of our webinar today, team. The question is this: think about your top 3 contacts that you have within your top 3 clients today. Who are they? Who are your top 3 contacts within your top 3 clients? Who are these go-to people that you're working with today? Quickly write them down. And then the next step I'd like you to take is write down your best guess on what level of value they would say you are today. Is it a level 1, very much a product price conversation? Is it a level 2, where perhaps you're more engaged in delivering implementation services and support? Is it level 3, where you're talking about certainly opportunities to reduce cost or gain competitive advantage or take market share? Or is it level 4, where you're consistently bringing new ideas, new insights, fact-based information to your clients where they can clearly see you're differentiated in how you work and engage with them? And then obviously your next step, and this is the hard work that needs to be put in to displace incumbents and win net new business, is what are you going to do to move up to a higher level of value? Probably won't have enough time to complete this effort on our webinar today. I strongly encourage you, and we'll have a call to action at the end of our webinar today. This could be some of the most important work you do, is you think about, take a step back and assess where you are in your biggest client relationships. Because often some of the biggest reasons why clients change from one supplier to the other is there's something that wasn't working well. And maybe they didn't even share it with you, only to find out the RFP that you responded to, you lost. Or the big proposal that you worked on, unfortunately, didn't come out on the winning end. Potentially, it was because of this. It was because the level of value the client was not perceiving from you, they got from someone else. So how can we get in front of that, and having more of a level 4 mindset ultimately is a path longer term for greater success. So just to kind of summarize in terms of the today and then the tomorrow, certainly your ability to move from a more transactional mindset to more consultative, taking the focus of product, which is important, and knowing features and benefits. What is it that the product will actually do from an outcome point of view for the client, and being able to actually explain that in layman's terms. being self-orientated versus other-orientated. The thought process of, I'm going to sell this client, or we're going to collaborate to build a solution together. Being reactive, certainly as it relates to prospecting, that maybe that's not a core competency for you today. To be proactive, actually time blocking in your calendar a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday morning between 8 and noon as the best times to be prospecting to clients to develop new business. As a very wise sales leader said to me once, Chris, prospecting is job security. Prospecting is job security. If you're not prospecting today to develop new business and looking to displace incumbents, there could be a point in time that pipeline becomes a little dry, especially at the top of the funnel, which arguably is the most important as you get clients into discussions with you that ultimately you'll bring through to close. And ultimately, from the execution aspect of a plan to being accountable to delivering certainly on the financial results to the organization, to your organization, but also accountability to deliver better results to your clients, and more proactive as opposed to responding to opportunities, actually creating opportunities. The sweetest wins you will ever have as a salesperson is the opportunity that you actually created through an idea or insight that you had when you brought to the client maybe something they weren't thinking of previously. An exciting spot to be. Probably one of the most important opportunities for a salesperson today is consulting and building new business. And to touch on kind of a fundamental from a CPSA point of view is the 8-step consultative sales process. When I was putting together the content for our webinar today, this was intuitively something that needed to be included, because when you think about how to drive a more quality client conversation that's really focused on understanding their business, kind of consultant investigation on steroids, your ability to be able to and understand the client situation first, you'll notice the 8 steps followed to explore solutions is 6. It's not 1 in terms of the 8-step consultative sales process. And this certainly is an opportunity in the CPSA Fundamental of Selling class, their 3-day program, which I actually have the good fortune of facilitating Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday next week. And this is really the heart of the Fundamental of Sales process. So great to see how CPSA is absolutely aligned to helping salespeople evolve in a more consultative fashion. We're going to get into chapter 2 now of Eat Their Lunch relative to mindshare. How you create mindshare is directly related to the client's wallet share that you have of their business today. And as a quick reminder of wallet share and what does this look like, imagine a client today who spends $1 million in your category a year. If they buy $100,000 from you, your wallet share is 10%. But that also tells me your upside is 90% in terms of where there could be potential to grow. Hence, the reason to start planning your competitive takeout strategy. This would be an ideal situation for you to go out and displace perhaps incumbents that have the larger wallet share of a client's business. How ultimately you do this is what we're going to talk about next, and how you develop mind share, which precedes wallet share. Really the lens by which the client starts to view you in terms of the value that you're bringing to the opportunity. It's harder to quantify, but the biggest part of what allows for a higher percentage of mind share, of wallet share, is driven through the portion of the client's thinking that you own and influence based on your ideas, your insights that you provide to them. And something that Anthony talks about in Eat Their Lunch is being a 52% SME, subject matter expert, that you can carry a conversation with a client today without having a specialist in the room with you, that you're literate enough in terms of the value, the product, the benefits that are, and in terms of the industry and market and trends that you're bringing to the equation, that you're able to deliver a lot of value in that first client meeting or engagement, or perhaps a new stakeholder that you're meeting. Being a 52% subject matter expert absolutely can differentiate in how you create market share for your clients. And again, using that language of being your client's second brain and really thinking almost on their behalf of what's happening in their business, and then bringing some ideas or insight that ultimately is in their best interest to actually spend more time with you as a result of that. So in terms of this mindshare, how do you create mindshare? Well, developing trends and insights, it kind of starts there. And this is a different framework in terms of the client conversation than perhaps might be a part of how you sell today. So perhaps this might be some ideas that you think about going back to the goal and idea that I suggested from you off the top is that client that you're trying to break through. Perhaps these are some tactical ideas on how you can actually break through. So how do you provide the context and insights that you bring, your company brings, your solution ultimately brings to the client conversation, and give them kind of an idea of why they must change in terms of, and I'm going to share a specific example with you shortly to kind of bring this to light. But the premise is you're looking at the super trends that are happening in business and then deriving insights from them as a way to have a different conversation with your client. And really, what we talked about in terms of being that 52% SME, this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your expertise and the strategic view that you have to provide advice. And something also that Anthony talks about, and I know this, I laugh sometimes as I describe it, being that trusted advisor requires two things. One, you build trust. Two, you provide advice. How do you provide advice? It's through the research and the view, the strategic view that you can provide to your client over and above the commodity type conversations that you're having with them today that ultimately compels change, ultimately plants a seed, if you will, on the future that you're ultimately going to help them with. And then connecting to your views and values in terms of the advice in a very consultative approach, in terms of how you position yourself as a trusted advisor. How do you align your views and values with the client's most strategic outcomes? Well, as you probably know, how identifying a strategic outcome first happens when you talk with the client in a first meeting, perhaps, about what their top 3 business priorities are for the next 18 to 24 months. Then you can connect the insight or the idea based on what they're trying to accomplish in their business. And then how do you position your solution in terms of the ability to meet their most strategic outcomes? Kind of that presentation, if you will. And maybe, this could be an opportunity in terms of a practical and tactical idea, thinking about a client conversation that maybe you're going to have in the next week. Changing the order of your PowerPoint, perhaps for those that use PowerPoint, in a way that the first slide is about the client. It's about their needs. It's about where they are in their evolution to bring a new product or service to market first. Your ability to clearly understand what the client's needs are first and getting agreement, then moving through your presentation and how you develop the business case through ROI and TCO are all important. But first and foremost, having that understanding of what the client's outcome is in their business sets you up in a more consultative way to actually earn a larger percentage of their business. And this is a real critical point, and perhaps an inflection point on a competitive takeout is discovery. More exploration, actually, as you think about your ability to get a handle on the client's situation, their picture, their challenges, from each of the individual stakeholders. From an IT point of view, when I spent time working at HP, is we often spend time talking to the director of IT, someone who had an issue with infrastructure, perhaps sometimes getting trapped, though, within that individual and not branching out into other lines of business. Other stakeholders have other views and values that are important to them. Your key to success is actually how you navigate getting to know those different stakeholders that ultimately can separate you from the competition that you're currently working against and ultimately looking to unseat. So assessing a client's current state, what are their motivation, what drives them, certainly understanding their wants and their needs, and then you come in as the welcome to the trusted advisor to be able to help them to envision a better future state. And you've actually created the ideas or insights to make that happen. And then build a consensus. Maybe some of you can relate to that opportunity that went dark. The client stopped responding to email. They stopped returning your phone calls. Ultimately, maybe that opportunity turned out in a loss. Oftentimes, there's someone behind that curtain that you just didn't know. And your ability to skillfully get support as you work through the different stakeholders and what's important to them, what are their priorities, ultimately can help you be more successful. I could probably spend hours this full day just talking about how to build consensus. Maybe that's a follow-on for a different webinar, perhaps. But building consensus ultimately is a key to success. How you present yourself and the content, the ideas that you provide, the research, the facts and figures enable you to gain consensus and sponsorship through a client organization. So here's an idea. This is an example taken straight out of the book from Eat Their Lunch on how to do the research and then actually quantify in bullet points trends. And in this case, we're looking at the technology industry, looking at information technology in that sector about the impact of cloud computing and how that's eliminating operational issues and reducing costs, how that's enabling more employees to work from home. And ultimately, the technology is experiencing exponential growth. And as a result of that, clients are adopting technology much, much faster. And that the consumer have a higher expectation of the companies that they're working with because that client relationship can be more personalized. So Anthony actually shared with me yesterday morning as we were talking about preparing for today, this research that he did that he put in to Eat Their Lunch. Now, this took time. It certainly took time to assess what's happening in this particular industry. But once you start to get into the rhythm of looking at trends and insights, perhaps this takes 30 minutes prior to a client meeting the day before. Maybe it takes an hour. But ultimately, your ability to bring ideas and trends, this all comes from the research that you do. Ultimately, implications. What's the consequence of standing still? And think back to the quote that we started with about, the consequence for not embracing change. The implication is, in a sales world, erosion of market share for you within your clients and lost deals. How you then provide the link to trends are helping the client see that if they don't adopt some of the ideas or suggestions that you have for them in terms of insights, the implication is for the client, lost business, lost market share, increased cost potentially. So linking it back to our example in terms of the trends, just one bullet point, both employees and customers expect that their companies will provide them with the technologies they need to interact with their company. If I was presenting this to a client today, I'd pause and I'd ask the question, in terms of the trend that we talked about in the impact of technology from an employee experience, how are you implementing technology within your company today to improve better experience for your employees? What are your thoughts? What are your views on what we've just discussed? Keep in mind, you haven't talked about your product yet. You're only talking about the client and what's happening in their business as a way to have a different client conversation. So very much the idea of bringing implications to the fore. What's the consequence of standing still? And then presenting an opportunity to share your views and values. This is you being the trusted advisor. This is you sharing a perspective on how you see the market and also how the client can see you as that 52% SME and how you link the trends to the implications to actually enabling them and the client's success in terms of their business. So what are the implications? And again, this would be a flow and an example of a presentation I would provide to a client in terms of linking those trends, views and values, implications, and then sparking the conversation and getting some feedback from the client, just what we discussed. So, if I was with a client today and we were talking about the implication of moving to a cloud-like model, the traditional on-premise software as an example versus on-site versus off-site, and certainly that's an area of the market where a percentage is shifting to more cloud-based models. How is that impacting you, Mr. Customer? Again, different ways to have a client conversation that's more engaged, that's more about them. This is our second action step in our webinar today, team, and we won't have time based on our available time that we have left in our webinar today, so I'm going to leave this one with you for homework. But I'd highlight the importance of doing this work and then identifying for you, what are the 4 or 5 trends that will cause your dream client to change? So as an example, if you work in the financial industry, what are the 4 or 5 trends in 2019 in the financial industry? If you work within manufacturing or technology, what are the top 5 trends that are impacting the technology industry today? What are the top 5 trends that are impacting healthcare? Google is our scout, and the information that you can obtain could be enlightening in how you actually have a different client conversation in a meeting, perhaps you're having with a client tomorrow. This takes a brave step, for sure. However, if you're most concerned about your client's business, this is very much a conversation worth having. Here's an example of a prospecting voicemail, because I don't expect to catch prospects often live. It's a bonus if you do, but often a voicemail that I would leave for a client, or perhaps I caught them live, but it's a different way to have a prospecting call with a client. So let's go through it. Hi, it's Chris Champagne from Champagne Consulting. I'm calling you today to ask for a 20-minute meeting where I can share with you an executive briefing about the 4 trends that will significantly impact the financial industry in the next 18 to 24 months. I'll also provide you with the questions we are answering for our clients so you can then share them with your management team. How does Tuesday at 10 work for you? So let's break this down. There's a couple of really important elements in here. The purpose, why you're calling, 20 minutes. Based on research, 20 minutes is the ideal amount of time. It's not too much, but enough for you to earn a client's time. And again, taking a more empathetic approach, I can share with you information. So you've done your research, you understand the trends, and you understand the industry and what changes are happening, which perhaps for me, if you were calling me, might pique my interest. Maybe there's some insights or opportunities that I can champion internally that we need to actually take advantage of. And then also taking the pressure off, I'll also provide you with questions we are answering for our clients, giving me some ideas or insights that I can actually take and use internally within my own organization. So really taking the pressure off the client in the value. This is a level 4. This is the way to be presenting from the right in her and having a strategic partner conversation right out of the gate. So just some ideas on how you can perhaps differentiate yourself in first client contact that's different versus calling to see if I can drop by next week for 20 minutes so I can share with you a little bit more about what Champagne Consulting does. It could work, and it does work today. However, you're being more thoughtful about this client's business, and you're thinking of them specifically. Last thing on prospecting. And again, we could probably spend a whole day on prospecting, and there is part of the CPSA program in terms of the fundamental of selling program in terms of the prospecting process itself that goes into much more depth. But the ability to actually block time in your calendar on a weekly basis to prospect. The strategy is time blocking. So part of a takeaway perhaps for you from today's webinar is scheduling 60 minutes every week for prospecting, and then doing the research. Perhaps your first meeting with yourself next week around prospecting is research the top 4 trends that are happening in my industry today. Then pick up the phone and start make the calls to be able to book your appointments, and perhaps using this as a framework. Okay, I'm catching my breath and walking you through the opportunity for you to differentiate yourself in the great work that the CPSA is doing in their designations in terms of a certified sales associate, certified sales professional, and certified sales leader. Those that are selling today, that you really want to differentiate yourself in terms of the investment you're making in you to make you a more valued asset to your clients, is what you're doing to actually prepare yourself to have better client conversations. And no better time in a hyper-competitive red ocean market to be investing in yourself. So this opportunity exists for everyone today. Maybe it just starts with a membership with the CPSA in terms of getting that conversation started, accessing tools including their Learning Hub that access recorded webinars like these, podcasts, white papers, research that ultimately can help you perhaps in understanding the trends that are happening in business, that are all accessible to you through first starting with a CPSA membership and perhaps continuing down and earning your designation. Last piece on investments. As we bring our time to close, and looks like we're going to actually have time for a few questions if any have come through on investments. Let's just put a little bit of juice into this one before we finish, because ultimately it brings us back to where we started in terms of you are the value proposition. This is a quote that Anthony had in one of his sales blogs, which, by the way, thesalesblog.com is how to follow Anthony. He blogs daily. He has for 4,025 days consecutively. So this, the quality of information is amazing and very current to today's selling. So this was a quote from one of his recent blog posts around the money that you put in investment vehicles. Think of the stock market may go up or down, or may not. You may not realize the return, no matter how safe the bet seems. However, no matter what else you're doing in terms of investing in yourself, there is simply no vehicle more certain to provide a return that exceeds the investment that you make in yourself. There's no better ROI than the time that you spend developing yourself in terms of your health, your own personal growth, soul in terms of reading, relationships and building, business and finance, all elements of investments that you're making in yourself. And I'm grateful for the time that you spent today investing in today's webinar as a means to help you learn about some tools and techniques in terms of how you can differentiate yourself in having a different client conversation. So here's the call to action. If I may boldly have a call to action in terms of your next steps, and again, bring us back to sales is there's no shortcut to success. This sales is, and being an ultra performer takes work. So here's the challenge. Schedule 90 minutes of investment time in your calendar, kind of the me time in the next 5 days. When you do that, take time to assess your top 5 relationships. Where are you? Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? How can you move up? What are the top 5 trends that will cause your dream client, this client you're trying to earn their business from, what can you provide to them in terms of ideas that sparks the opportunity for change, and to change now or to change in the future? And you are the ones that actually provided them with their ideas, with these ideas. To learn more before we move to close and to do the draw for the 3 Eat Their Lunch books, great opportunity to connect on LinkedIn, perhaps explore a customized Eat Their Lunch workshop, potentially could be a next step. How to make that happen is real simple. send me an email, cc@chrischampagne.ca. I'm good timing, perhaps. I'm facilitating next week's Fundamental of Selling course with the CPSA, July 23rd to 25th. It'd be awesome to have some of you there. And I'm grateful. Thank you on behalf of the CPSA for investing an hour of your time today and attending today's webinar.
Thank you, Chris. On behalf of the CPSA, thank you so much for hosting, and of course to our audience for attending. If you'd like a recording of this webinar, please stay tuned, as the webinar has been recorded and will be sent out to registrants. If you have any questions about this webinar, please feel free to email me at salessuccess@cpsa.com. And to our winners of the Eat Their Lunch book, they are, drum roll please, number 1, Barry Fukumoto, number 2, Wendy Jekyll-Fisher, and number 3, Bruce Kine. Congratulations to the 3 of you. So if you could please email me, Barry, Wendy, and Bruce at salessuccess@cpsa.com. We can arrange for you to receive your book, your prize. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks, everyone, for your time. Good selling. Bye for now.